welcome back, listeners, to Faith Imperfect with Jessica. This is kind of a part 2 to my first episode about my faith journey. So in my last podcast, I talked about some of my early faith journey. I haven't talked about my most recent turning point in this latest season of my life that actually led me to this. There was a lot of little pieces, but I didn't really get into the brunt of it. So the first time that I felt that feeling of my calling, I never talked about my second time, but that first time I mentioned was when I was talking about changing my career to teaching and talked to my mother-in-law. And then she advised me to try out Sunday school, because that would be a good way to test out teaching kids. And then that led to me reading the Bible and getting more into studying because I didn't want to have to teach the kids, and I didn't want to teach the kids without knowing what I had to teach, so I was studying it a lot. So I started getting the feeling again about 5 years later, so 5 years after that first time, and I thought it was job related because I had been at that job for 5 years after college. Back in elementary school and middle school, I loved art and I loved drawing. And when I learned how to do those 3D perspective drawings, I would draw buildings and street views. And I was like, oh, I want to be an architect. And really, I'd never went into architecture because I was really good at math. And my calculus teacher told me, hey, computers can do that architect stuff, but you're good at math. You should go into engineering. They need women. So I ended up doing engineering right out of high school. So 5 years after I already had been in an engineering job after college, I was like, oh, maybe I need to switch to architecture. Maybe this calling I'm getting is because I didn't follow my dream of being an architect. So I applied to a college. I took a portfolio over there and talked to them and everything, and they accepted me. And I was like getting excited. I was like, okay. And then guess what? I found out I was pregnant with my son. And so I was like, oh boy, okay. I guess architecture is not going to happen, at least not right now. And I still didn't realize at that point that my calling wasn't career related, or at least not at that time. But I knew that something was missing, and so I thought, well, maybe it's the baby, and so obviously I had my son and very distracted with all that stuff. So raised my son, helped with Sunday school still. Then I had my daughter. Now, when I had the daughter, it was a lot more trying to juggle the two kids. And so I was absent more from church. In fact, at one point, the absence was so long that I asked my husband, should we switch churches? Because if we're going to, this is the time, because he wasn't going either. And at that point, I guess looking back, I didn't feel a personal connection to really anybody at the church to the degree where I was like, I got to stay there. And I guess I kind of always somewhat felt like an outsider. So I would just go and then leave. Didn't really get a whole lot involved. I was doing the Sunday school, but then once I had the kids, I kind of stopped doing Sunday school and kind of broke that. I don't know, there was a disconnect there. So, I want to say like a year later, I did start going back. Once I talked to him about, this is the time, if we're going to switch churches, let's switch now. And he's like, no, let's not switch it. And I was like, okay, well then I did feel like there was something saying, start going back to church. So I started going and taking the kids. And that was when I started volunteering again. And everybody was really nice. I mean, there was nobody that ever made me feel like, specifically in that group, that made me feel like I didn't belong. So it started to feel more like a community and less like an outsider with that. And so again, recently, like a year ago, well, off and on, I've had the feeling, but I'll just be honest. I was ignoring it because it's like, I didn't know what it was, but it also kind of scared me. Like, what if this thing is going to completely uproot my life? So there was a part of me that was kind of ignoring it too. But then the times when it was really strong, it's like, okay, I got to do something. I got to figure out what it is. So I was getting that strong feeling again. And I happened to be part of a book study. And the book was called Living Fearless. And I'm going to do another podcast about it at some point, and I'll give you guys the author and everything, because I thought it was a great book. It was wonderful. And I can get into the details with that podcast. But in the book, there is a part, you learn a lot of stuff, but there is a part where they have you exercise talking to God and listening. And there's different steps you have to do to really hear stuff, to hear answers. And it really did work. So anyhow, just to kind of preface it, my husband was planning a trip to see family out of state. And we usually all go together. I've never not went. But I had a wedding with my family that I RSVP'd to, that at least I would go. So him and the kids went out of state. We've never done that before, so that was very different. Like, oh gosh, I'm here by myself. I don't have the kids. They're all with their dad. And I got the house to myself for a couple days. And so I did the exercise one of the evenings. No distractions, complete focus. And I was going to read from my journal that I wrote that day. But I think I actually summarized it pretty well. Let me see. Yeah, let's see. I'll just do the summary I wrote out for it. But so in it, I had to ask key things, but I didn't fully understand their meanings. So first I was told in the book, it said, ask him, what do you want to tell me? What does God want to tell me? So I was praying and praying and praying, and he was like, you can do this. And I'm like, do what? So then I was supposed to ask, who am I? Like, how does he see me? Who am I? And I heard speaker and encourager. And I was like, speaker? What? I fear public speaking. I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this. I do not like public speaking. I'm so self-conscious. I feel like I stutter. I feel like I do the ums and the uhs and the and there's times I will go just completely blank, okay? So when I heard speaker, I thought, no, there is no way. And so there was a part of me that thought, is this just my conscious talking and all this? But at that point, with some of the other exercises that were before that, I was thinking, oh, maybe this is just my own thoughts and it's not God talking to me. But then when I got that answer, I was like, nah, I know that is not me. I know that speaker is not me. Encourager, maybe. But speaker was like the first word? I'm like, okay. So I was like, what in the heck is that supposed to mean? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? So I had all these questions I was asking, and it led me in these prayers. It said, talk to your friend that's a deaconess. Like, it said the name in my in the prayer. God told me the name. He's like, talk to this person. And so she's a friend of ours that's a Lutheran deaconess. So I texted her this long message, and it's funny because it was a year ago. And so I don't know if I don't think I've gotten a new phone since then, but I didn't have the text message. But I texted her yesterday and I said, hey, you remember that? Send it to me. Now I sent this to her at like 2 a.m. because I was doing this exercise and then I was just praying on it all night. And I had such excitement that I was getting information from God. Like, I was so excited, I couldn't sleep. I was like, I've never had that, because I hit the pillow, I'm out. But my mind was racing and I had all these ideas and I was like, oh my goodness. So I texted her this. It said, hey, I don't know if I ever told you this story of how for many years now I feel like God is telling me there's something he wants me to do that I haven't done yet. But it's been like that for a while. There's times the feeling is really strong and at times it wanes, but it's never gone away. I recently joined this book club with other Christian women. It talks about finding our identity of who God made us to be. I've prayed about this feeling, but never felt like I had a clear direction. This book had different questions to ask in prayer. I asked God who I am to him. I waited and prayed. And a part of that process was you have to confess your fears and sins, and then he'll like reveal it to you. And that is what happened. And then it said, then I feel like he called me speaker. I don't know if he means like public speaking or if it's speaking for those who can't speak for themselves. I said, then I heard encourager. And then I prayed, what does this look like? I didn't get an answer, but then I prayed, what should I do tomorrow to help me on this journey? And he told me to reach out to you. Do you have any words of wisdom? So she's like, let's meet in person. And I'm like, okay. So when I met with her, she's like, do you think it's to be a Lutheran deaconess? And I said, I don't know. I said, but it led me to you, you know? And so we had a long discussion, and I just kept that in the back of my head, and I still am like, is it something I'm supposed to be preparing for? And so in our conversation, she says, you need to talk to your pastor. Now, let me back up just a tad with the pastors in my church. So at my church, we had a pastor who was there. Gosh, I think he was there 30 years, but I was only there at the church with him. Like he married us, me and my husband. So he was the pastor at our church while we were there for probably maybe 18 years or so. I know he's a really nice guy, and so is his wife. They're super nice. And he retired, and he would still come around, and he was still available if I wanted to talk to him. And we had an interim pastor that I really liked also. Like, he was super nice. He was he's just very approachable and everything. Okay. Well, he was gone because now we had our new pastor. And I like our new pastor. At the time, I liked him too, you know, but I was more cautious because I didn't really know him then. I didn't know him more personally, I guess. And so I was like, oh, you know, so I was like, okay. So after I left her, you know, that meeting with her, I was like, well, maybe I don't have to go to him. Maybe I'll go to my old pastor, right? Because maybe I just have to go to one of my pastors. So I went to the older pastor, not the older pastor. I actually don't know their ages, but the first pastor that I had, you know, the one that I was with for 18 years. And he seemed real, like, oh, you know, like supportive and everything like that. But I didn't feel like I really got any answers. He was just like, oh yeah, if you need something, you know, but I can't remember. That's the thing, is looking back, I couldn't even remember a whole lot of the conversation to even say, okay, what did I get out of that? So then I thought, well, maybe I'll talk to the interim pastor. But it was around Christmas time that year. It was right before the holidays. And he plays Santa. He's retired, you know, and he was just filling in as an interim pastor for us while he was retired. And he plays Santa and does that for like a lot of people. And so he has a really busy season. So I ended up not calling because I thought, I don't want to bother him. I know he's got a lot going on. And he does some other work, like with missionary type stuff, but it's around here with animals and comforting people. So I was like, oh, okay. So I went ahead and I finally said, all right, I'm going to talk to the new pastor. And so I want to say that probably took 3 months before I went to talk to him. Okay. And so when I went to him and I told him about that, pretty much the same kind of thing. I didn't tell him all the details of how I got the answers. I said, God's trying to call me. I think it might be maybe to be a Lutheran deaconess. I'm not sure. And the first thing he said is, what you need to remember is you're a wife and a mother first. And so I was kind of like, what? So at first I thought, does he think I'm going to just up and leave my family and just run off to do some cause for God? Because I guess there are probably people that do that, but I'm like, I'm not going to abandon my family. But I probably misinterpreted the way he responded, but I think it was just for me to remember, like, don't forget, you're a mom and a wife and a mom first. And then sometimes he said, our calling is right where we're at. And I was kind of disappointed. I don't know why. I was like, oh. And then I was like, because I almost felt like he was discouraging me, you know, but I don't think that was, again, I think I was misinterpreting it. So then in our conversation, I found out that he used to have a different profession, and he used to be an engineer, just like what I am. And he had different things happen. I can't remember the details, if like something happened with the business or what, but at that point, before he did any changing, he knew there was something coming. He had a feeling, like a calling for something, and he started preparing and he started studying. And then something happened with the business. I don't remember the details of that. And So then he ended up going to seminary. He knew at that point that this is the time and I need to go to, now I'm going to do it. So, and now he's a pastor. And it's like, oh my gosh, why did I avoid talking to him? Again, like God told me what to do. And there was a pretty clear direction of who I had to go to. And I was completely avoiding it. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I wasn't very obedient, but eventually I did listen. It took me a little while. At least it didn't take me years because it was a very helpful conversation. So I just decided at that point, okay, I've talked to everybody I need to talk to. I didn't feel like what he said, I did feel like it sent me into a next step. It was like, prepare. Just start preparing for whatever you think it is. And you'll know when you're being called. You'll know. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, you know what? In the meantime, I'm just going to dig my heels in, or whatever they say that is. That saying, I always, by the way, I always get those kind of sayings wrong. Like, instead of giving my sister a heads up on something, I'll tell her, I'm going to give you a thumbs up. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I meant a heads up. So I'm always messing those up. So I probably said the wrong thing. It's probably not digging my heels in. And I think when I originally was going to think of what to say, I was thinking in my head, dig my feet in, which would have been wrong. I think it's dig my heels. So anyway, so I started helping with Sunday school again. And then my kids both were moving up to the next level out of Sunday school. And we don't have we don't have a lot of children in our group, in our church. And we don't have that many youth either. We have some. And they were like, there's nobody to lead youth group. And really, it didn't sound like there was too many people that wanted to do it. And I was like, oh, I might be interested in doing that. So I volunteered for youth group, and I ended up doing like a church council thing as secretary, which I learned a lot from the church council stuff, all the behind the scenes workings and stuff like that. And so, and even with the youth group, again, I'm learning, because I think I talked about it in my last podcast. Yeah, that like we're doing this book that talks about all kinds of different questions that Christians have, and it helps fill in those gaps, like the authenticity of the Bible and all that kind of stuff. So I am learning more there too. And so, but then I'm also trying to, since then I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to be a little bit better example for my kids, because I'm one of those who, I'll be honest, I cuss a lot. And I was doing it around my kids a lot, to where my son would even be like, Mom. And so I'm like, okay. So I try not to do it anymore. I'm trying to be better about that. And I'm trying to show and teach them grace, like how I'm trying to show grace to them and teach them grace to others, so I'm hoping, and I think that's all paying off. So I am doing a little more of a Christian focus in that sense on our day-to-day stuff. So it's interesting because the nagging went away. So all this came to fruition probably about a year ago, And so fast forward to recently, I get this random thought like, I want to do a podcast and I can talk about The Chosen. Because I was like, well, if I did a podcast, what would it be on? I wouldn't be able to come up with any topics. And I was like, okay, I'll talk about The Chosen because I really like that series. And I was super eager, and I asked my friend, hey, do you want to do the Chosen thing with me? And it was all by text. And she's like, that sounds fun. And well, I got so excited, I started like drafting up banners, coming up with names, doing like stuff for, and I never did any of this before. It was all to experiment, but I got to do a little bit of the artsy stuff because, I do like crafts and art, and, because I was big into art when I was growing up. And so I was like, oh, this will give me some, creative freedom to make stuff. And then I got the microphone, and I was like, I'm going to test this thing out. So I had written up a synopsis of one of the episodes, and I just was talking into the mic and then listening back to the recording, and the software showed me all my ums and ahs and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, oh boy, but I was just experimenting. I knew this wasn't going to go public. It wasn't going to be something I was going to post. And I texted my friend, I'm so excited. I got a microphone. I recorded an episode just to test it out. And so she wrote back, and she almost sounded mad, like, you did it without me? It sounds like you don't need me, But then she did all these encouraging texts, like, this might be your calling. Maybe this is your thing. This is your baby. Not, I can join as a guest, but this is your thing. So she was very encouraging and everything. And I was like disappointed. I'm like, oh, well, if we're not going to do this together, I got to do this by myself. And then I was like, okay, well, I started to think about it. I was like, well, if that's the case, then I'm really going to make it mine. Like, even though I know she had like no input on the stuff I was doing, it was all stuff that could be changed. Like, I was just playing around with the programs. And I told her that too. I said, if you really want to do it, we can. I can change. All of this, none of this is permanent stuff. Like, you can change any of that stuff, even your channel name. I guess you could change it twice every 14 days or something. And so I thought, all right, well, if we're not going to do it together, I'm going to really make it my own. And I want to briefly talk about that too. There was a point where I did Mary Kay. I was told about the opportunity, and I was like, oh, maybe that will be an opportunity to, if I do well enough, work from home, be able to take care of the kids and then squeeze in Mary Kay stuff instead of having to go to a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 type of job, And but I started it more like a hobby just to see, because I wasn't going to just quit my job. I was getting engineer pay. So I started Mary Kay, and I was doing it, and it was fun, but it was like, I realized over time that I was like, I'm not really into this because it's not something that I created. It wasn't something from my own imagination, creation. It was just like, I can't really get into it because it's not mine. I'm selling someone else's product. I love their products, by the way. They are fantastic. But yeah, I just was like, I'm just not into this. It's not mine. So it kind of reminded me back to that situation of, yeah, you know what? Make it yours. So instead of doing The Chosen, which is a great thing, a great series, I love it. I recommend it. And we still might do some episodes of it. I might do it as a series on my page. But instead of doing someone else's creation, I could do something that's my experience, my journey, my creation, and then I started brainstorming, and I came up with my faith journey topics, and I was going to call it My Faith Journey, but I realized I think I want to make My Faith Journey a series, because the more and more I've thought about it, I liked Faith Imperfect as a name for all of it. So anyhow, I was so fulfilled, and I was so excited. I still am. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope even if just one person gets something out of this. But with everything else, just feels so right. So one of the times I was recording a second episode. So my very first episode, I had an outline, just bullet points to keep me going, so I stayed on task with the time and everything. And then I filled in all the stories and filled in all the questions. But I did a second one, just impromptu, and the file ended up getting corrupt. But in that podcast, and I wish I had it, because I was like, oh my gosh, in the middle of recording, I was like, oh, that's when I realized it's come full circle. When me who fears public speaking, and I'm going to do a podcast? Am I really doing this? Because that could reach a lot of people. And I'm like, really? Because I hate the spotlight. I don't like being the center of attention. But I was like, am I really going to do this? Are people? So that was my first thing, where that part of me that was like, wow, this has got to be it. And it's possible it's not, but I'm going to just try it. And so that's kind of why I'm here now. That's not kinda, that is. That's why I'm here now. And so I remembered back to that prayer and talking with God and him saying speaker and encourager. I'm like, oh, wow. It's just so funny. I was like, oh my gosh, this must be it. I got so excited. I still am. I just, yeah. And I'll get into this in another episode too, with comparison. So after all that, right, and I did my couple of recordings, I sometimes will listen to podcasts at different times of the day, and I pulled up a podcast because, like, I wonder what kind of podcasts are out there about faith. And there was one from a pastor, and it had like 2 episodes. I'm like, okay, and it looks like it was years ago, and they didn't. I'm like, all right. So I kept looking, and I came across this one, and the woman is a great speaker. She's fantastic, super animated. She's been doing this for like 5 years. She's got a great following. So then I start comparing and having self-doubt. Like, oh, I don't have the qualifications to do this. What am I thinking? And something told me, listen to an episode that's an earlier episode. Because that was the latest episode, I believe. And it was good. And I went to an earlier episode of hers. And that's when I figured out that she started out just like me. She was just wanting to help people, wanting to share her journey with things and how her faith is, how she's grown in her faith. And I was like, okay, I can do that, So, so I'm going to do this. Are you going to join me on this journey with Faith Imperfect? I'm so excited. I'm just so excited. So, I'm going to do a short prayer, and then I hope to be back on for more episodes, and I hope you guys are getting something out of it. And if there's stuff you want me to elaborate more on or talk about, just put it down in the comments. And yeah, I'm super excited. Okay, so dear God, guide me and direct me of what to do and what to say that others need to hear and what I need to hear. And I hope you help us through. Well, I'm going to have to redo this prayer. It's not good. Let me start over. Dear God, I'm so excited about this opportunity. I wanted to do it right, but I know I'm not perfect. Help me in my imperfectness to be able to do this and be able to come up with topics and things to help others and to help me on this journey of strengthening my faith and our faiths in you. In Jesus' name, amen.